facilitator, also another important individual that kind of transcends beyond just only administrator. This is an artist, an intellectual, and somebody who's like really profound in the work that they do too. And I have a lot of respect for I would say Punkashi, I would refer to her in that term, but Dr. Mary Bordeaux. So everybody please give a welcome to Mary Bordeaux. And then I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks, Keith. I was so embarrassed when people call me doctor, even though I have finished my doctorate degree. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Mary Bordeaux. I'm Sicangu Oglala Lakota and co-founder of Racing Magpie, Peter mentioned earlier. I also assistant professor at Black Hills State University. And I also adjunct online for the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. And so today we're here to kind of reflect on the significance of the number 4 in Lakota culture and creative practices. And you know, 4 exists in many parts of Lakota life. You know, and balance, thinking about cycles, directions, relationships, responsibilities. And so this morning's discussion is we're going to listen to how these understandings are carried through artistic practices and lived experiences of our artists here. And so it's an honor for me to welcome these 3 Lakota artists whose work spans many years, and they have all made significant contributions to our communities and Native art broadly. And we're grateful for their willingness to share their thoughts and stories and reflections with us this morning. We're going to start with, so I'll introduce each artist, and I'll start with Martin Red Bear, who's Sicangu Oglala Lakota. He's an acclaimed artist and educator known for blending traditional historical styles with contemporary painting techniques. Martin holds art degrees from the Institute of American Indian Arts, the College of Santa Fe, and the University of New Mexico. And he specializes in combining pictographic, there we go, I got that word, hide painting style with more modern materials. And as a veteran, much of his work honors Lakota warrior tradition and bringing it into a more contemporary space. And beyond his art practice, Martin has been a dedicated educator and cultural advocate to generations of tribal students. Gerald Cournoyer, Senior, is Oglala Lakota and is a prominent painter and educator whose work bridges traditional Native themes with contemporary abstract artistry. He's I said he was Oglala already. He was born and raised in Marty, the youngest of 14 children. He is also a veteran serving in the United States Marine Corps for 4 years. He has multiple advanced degrees, which really reflects on this lifelong commitment to both his artistic practice and professional development, with master's in arts management, a master's in fine art painting, a master's in philanthropy and fundraising. And Colleen Cutschall is the other artist on the panel, who is also Oglala Lakota and is a prominent visual artist, art historian, and educator. Originally from the Pine Ridge Reservation, she has lived and worked in southwestern Manitoba, Canada since the 1980s. I believe she's back in South Dakota full time now, though. Her multidisciplinary practice spans painting, sculpture, photography, and installation art. She began her formal artistic training in the late 1960s under Dakota master Oscar Howe. And she has her academic background includes a bachelor's of fine arts and a master's of science and education. Yeah, okay. I'll just, I don't want to take up too much time, and let the artist will take about 20 to 25 minutes to discuss the significance of four within their artistic practice and touch maybe a little bit on how Lakota ways of knowing have shaped their creative practices. And there'll be time after the artist presents for us to ask questions. So if you have questions, there'll be time after their presentations to ask questions. I'll hand it over to Martin. He will be the first to go today. And so take it away, Martin.
Thank you, Mary. We talk about the four numbers in our societies. Well, we find out that there's a lot of societies that have the same thing, the same ideas, or using the same numbers and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about this morning is that there is a lot of different cultures that depend on various things and reasons and why in which they do things. And working with that, we talk about the four numbers, especially with the Lakota peoples. And what I'm going to talk about is something that's directly from my own opinion, and that there is a lot of differences out there, and a lot of people have different ideas about what these numbers represent and so on. And so I'm just going to give you my idea about what they are. First of all, when we talk about the four numbers, I reflected on the fact that it represents the four directions. It also represents four different colors, and also represents cultures, four different cultures. But there's actually, when you come to think about it, there's more than four cultures who use these same ideas. And that for one instance in talking about it with another person was that there's also two other numbers that are included in here, the number 6 and the number 7. First of all, the four direction numbers deal with the north, south, east, and west, and the colors of black, yellow, white, and red. But also the other one, working with the 6th number, is that it deals with the persons that have to do with up in the sky, and then another number that deals with down below, and then the 7th number deals with yourself, the person who you are. And it's not just the whole group, but as you as an individual who make up a part of this whole group. And also that number 7 represents the 7 different tribes, what is called part of the Sicangu Oglala. And this is a part of which the 7 tribes of the Oglala, Sicangu, Koju, Hunkpapa, and the other tribes that are all a part of that. And so when we talk about the four directions, we talk about the north being red, the west being black, the south being white, and the east being yellow. Now, there might be some of you out there who may see that some of these colors might be a part of a different part of the directions. But you got to remember, everybody's an individual and they see things differently and they interpret them differently. And so as a result of that, you find that these differences are all a part of who the people are. And there are some tribal people that use these four directions and four colors, but they change. For instance, in some of the tribes in the east, change their black to blue or change their black to green. So, and then it represents something else other than just human beings. It represents, for instance, animals. It represents the buffalo, the bear, the eagle, and the elk. So that's a different tribal interpretation about what these directions mean to these individual people. Now, when we come down to it, I was working with my brother and we were talking about the four directions, and the direction in the west is black, and it represents thunder, it represents water, sage, represents the black people, represents reflection and mental clarity. Okay. Then the north represents white. It's balance, winter, physical strength. In the south, it's growth, emotional insights, and then it's the red that represents the people, the native people. Then in the east, it's yellow, and it's where the new beginnings start. It's spiritual guidance, and it also represents Asian people, fire, tobacco, and all of that. So there's all different parts of that. Then continuing on, looking into some other portions of it, you'll find that there are individuals who see it differently, come from a different time, and as time goes on, things change. Not drastically, but in a way in which you could see the differences. Okay. For instance, this one individual works on the color black, and it comes from the west, and that's to where the sun sets. Okay. And it's the end of days, and it's also the end of life. It also deals with the thunderbird, which lives in the west. And it also deals with thunder, rain, and the source of water, lakes, rivers, streams. And as we all know, we cannot exist without water. So that's very important. The next one is red with north. Begins where it's cold, it's harsh winds. It's the winter season. The winds are cleansing. Leaves begin to fall. One learns patience and endurance. Also stands for the hardships and discomfort. North also represents tribal people's most endurance and cleansing as they go along and as they go and grow in age. The next one will be yellow in the east. The direction of in which the sun comes up. It's light in the morning. It's the beginning of the light changing from dark, going into the morning. It's also the understanding of how light helps us see things more clearly. And it's wisdom helping in people's lives as it develops in a good way. People rise in the morning and pray and ask God for wisdom and for understanding. That all falls under the east, under the yellow. And the next one is white in the south. Direction stands for warmth, for growing, drawing life from the earth, life in all things, that when people pass into the spirit world, they travel along the Milky Way and back and going to the south, returning where they all came from. So the idea is that we all have a cycle of life. There was one other example that was given, and that these four directions changed as time went on. For instance, the first direction is if you look at the teepee and the symbol of a teepee, that each point has a direction, okay? And then eventually it goes into a circle. The first circle is the earth, okay? The earth in which we live in. And that provides the water, the food, the plants, the animals, and all of that. Then we go from there to the next circle, which is the sun. Now the sun provides warmth for us. And depending on time of the year in which it travels, is that it determines the seasons, okay? Going from fall to winter and spring and then summer and so on and so forth. Then finally, the last one, the last circle, it deals with the moon. And at one time, it was called the mother moon. Someone asked, well, what was it used for? How did the people interpret it? Well, the moon does give light and at times at night when it's full. At times when it's half moon and there's a crescent moon, then it's a little different. And when it's at a crescent moon, you find that there are other cultures who use that symbol in their way of thinking and about the way they portray things. And so as a result of that, you find that those four symbols changed as years went on. And as we think about it, time goes on and time changes. And so as a result of that, what we know and what we understand changes to a certain extent. And if we think about the culture itself or the languages even, they start to change, not because we want them to change, but just through time. Time changes a lot of different things. So what I learned about the four directions and about life was different from my great-grandparents, okay? Because they lived in a different time. They lived in a different area, in a different space. So as a result of that, we find all these changes. Okay.
Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe how FOR has we have a few of your pieces and maybe how it impacts how you have created your work?
Well, a lot of my work when I was first working with it, I didn't really have the four directions in mind. But in seeing a lot of work from going from art shows to magazines, to pictures, to exhibits, and so on and so forth, I've always seen that four, okay? I didn't realize really that was a part of what the four depicted at first. So I would use that as an example. And as an example there, in this particular one, you can see in the very center, you have the black, red, white, and yellow. I put that in there as color just to balance off all the designs and color that's on the inside, not realizing that that was a part of the whole thing. Go ahead, next one. And then you can see where the designs are, they come out all in fours. And it just made the pictures and the paintings more attractive. And that's what I was trying to get at. And so as you can see, using a lot of design and color is what my work is made up. And basically that's what it is.
And so the work is the FOR is helping to like balance things too on the canvas for you as you're working.
Yes, it did. It completes the composition out so that everything balances out and everything is a design of its own, but it does not take away from anything else.
They're almost like they're all supporting each other.
Yes, yes, they are.
Is there anything else you wanted to add to or?
No, I'm good with that.
Okay. Okay, so next we have Gerald Cournoyer and I'll let you get started.
In my studies at the University of Oklahoma, they spoke about changing the way that I painted. They loved what I was doing, and they said, let's help you get another voice, an intellectual voice. We really love the figurative works that you're doing. Now let's combine something up. So I wanted to do Lakota spirituality, thinking of how Oscar Howell made that change when he went down to the University of Oklahoma, and how they told him that he already had a grasp of the figurative works of the Native people at that time. And he wanted a more intellectual conversation. So as I started in on my studies, I had to do a lot of reading and a lot of writing. And I thought, wow, I came down here to paint. I didn't come down here to read and write and to study. And at that time I was sun dancing. And so I really got into it. I got into how this spirituality can influence the work. And so that's the direction that I took. And we talk about 4 directions. So when we pray to the west, to the north, and east, to the south, pray to the Creator, Mother Earth, and self. So that's what I did every day when I went in to do my work. I always started off giving thanks and making my prayers that whatever I'm thinking about, playing those ceremonial songs as I'm painting, thinking of that Sundance. So every time I would paint, I painted from a distance. So I'd get some paint on my brush, and as I'm walking up to the painting, then I add something here and I walk backwards. Then I keep going forward and I add some more paint, and then I walk backwards. It's like charging the tree in the morning at the Sundance. You come up and you say prayers with that tree, and then you're asking for all of these things that only you know about and why you're there. And so as I'm doing this, I thought, man, this is just like being at the Sundance. So it became a ceremonial, like every day. Every day I went into the studio and it became a ceremonial for me. I smudged, I prayed, and then when I started with my music, and I would go up to that painting and I'd walk backwards. And so it just stayed with me. And then I started really getting into each one of the ceremonials. So when we go to Inipi and the 4 doors that we have there, and the prayers that are said inside, and the number of rocks. And so I'm really like getting into it now, thinking about all of those legends and lores like the older painters talked about, those older artists, legend and lore. So I thought about sun and the moon were married, and then they had these 4 sons, and then they went to the 4 directions, and the south wind marries morning star. So I started really thinking about that and how I can incorporate all of these things into my work. I didn't want to paint really stylized, beautiful portraits anymore. I wanted to have an intellectual conversation with the viewer. So I really got into the Sundance is 4 days, the womanhood is 4 days, the Hamlecha is 4 days. And it's all marking time, each person's step in life. So you go from that child to that young adult to adulthood, and now you're over here on this side, and you're on that elder stage, that Chala. So we chach Chala or we nuch Chala, and that's kind of where these guys are. No, I'm just kidding. That's where we're at in our path, in our journey. And as we come around,
He said that respectfully, right?
yes. as we're making our turn, and now we're looking back and we're doing more teaching. We're doing more teaching so that these ceremonials won't be lost. That the representation of all the things that we do, let's not skip a step. Let's find those songs. Let's keep all of this alive. So when we go to the Sundance and we're participating out there, we bring that tree in. When we bring that tree in, we stop and we pray to the west, and we go and pray to the north, to the east, to the south, and then we bring it in. And a lot of the younger people, they watch that, but they're saying what's actually happening. So they don't realize that this is all part of it. So when our younger generations, they want to skip a step, let's just get this over with. And I said, all of this takes time. And it's done that way for a very specific purpose. So when I think about that Inipi or the womanhood, Humblecha, the Sundance, those are very important pieces of everyday life. So these ceremonials, the keeping of the soul, throwing of the ball, or the making of a relative, each one of these helps every person through every stage of their life, those 4 stages of life. So I really think about that. And then, like Marty says, the colors, the red, the yellow, the black, and the white, and how that all ties together. It's just a continual celebration of one's life. And that's how I look at it when I wake up in the morning. Like, I'm still here. I can still contribute to my community, family, and my teaching. When we do talk about all of these other cultures around the world, so there is color, there is geometric design, there's all of these similarities. So I even talk about the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then even the Beatles, right? John, Paul, George, and Ringo. So there's 4 and all kinds of stuff. And as we're going through life, we start to see those things. When we get to where we are, that Oglala stage, that we're starting to look back and we're starting to remember and we're starting to do more for the next generation, whatever that is. So however we communicate with our works. And my notes are all over the place. Well, Marty said a lot of it. I'm just
So you mentioned that you want to have this intellectual conversation with your work and the viewer, essentially. So how can contemporary audiences or audiences look, what can they learn from Lakota understandings of this kind of cyclical thinking, this thinking in 4s, and rather than like this kind of linear, the way Western thought thinks kind of linear. And what can your work, your paintings, how do they have this intellectual conversation? And maybe just an audience, local or not.
So when people come to the work, they already bring a preconceived notion of what you're supposed to be painting. So at one point, someone said, you need more buffalo in there. You need more teepees in there. And I thought, that's not the direction that I'm going. I want people to have an understanding of these patterns and these symbols that we have. And so when you're looking at the pattern, some of them are that figure ground reversal. So is it the darker, or is it the lighter, or what's coming forward? And so now you're thinking about the work, and you're looking, that, and I'm sure most of us don't go up to a painting and say, okay, rule of thirds, and I'm going to break this down, and that kind of thought. You want them to come up fresh mind, read your artist statement first, and then as you come through, now you're trying to put yourself in that person's shoes who painted this and what were they thinking about, that thought process that brought them to what you're looking at. And so sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed, but that one with the triangles with the
tree and
yeah. Okay, so this was my Sundance painting. And as I was doing this, I wanted to create that flow going straight up. So when you look at the bottom part of it, it kind of looks like a teepee, and that other part where it crosses over. So when I was going to a lot of NAC meetings, and they would be throwing the cedar on the fire, and we're blessing ourselves, and we're saying our prayers, and we're rolling our smoke, and we're smoking, and we're all praying. And I started looking up, and I was like, this is where those prayers go. Once they hit that top of the teepee, that smoke going up, and then it completes that circle. So that mirror image that we always talk about, as is below, as is above, or whatever the saying is, however it goes. But that's that point where we're having an intellectual conversation, we're having a spiritual conversation with the creator, when everything is happening all at once. The song, the drum, the prayer, and that feeling, the whole feeling, everything's coming together all at once. And the creator listened. So on the sides, I started thinking about that day, what that day feels like. It's not as hot in the early morning, but during the afternoon, it gets a lot hotter, and you can feel it. And then as the sun's going down. So as the sun's going down, you're thankful that you made it through that day, and that you're going to, when you come in tomorrow, you're going to be more refreshed, and you're really like praying. So I have that tree that goes into the ground, and so we talk about that buffalo heart, that wasna, and that cherry juice that you put down there, and then you smudge that tree on it, and then you start putting on your flags of the 4 colors before you pull up the tree, and then that's when you're ready to communicate for those 4 days, for that the whole entire year of just prayer for a family, for self, for community. So that was my whole MFA. It was all about bringing the ceremonials together, trying to create a intellectual conversation with some of the younger people from the communities. But they could look at these and think, I wonder what's going on here. More than the 3 to 5 seconds that you give in a gallery. You walk through, don't like it, hate it, kind of like it, that kind of conversation. So that's what I was trying to do. And so I have these horses that went all the way around in between each piece at this show in Fargo. So you'd walk through and you'd see horses, and then you would see this next piece. So all the way around, and we entered from, I thought we could enter from the east, but when you came around, you came in one way, and then you kind of followed it all the way around, and then you left at the circle. So when we enter our powwow arena or ceremonials, we always come in from the east, we go to the left, we go all the way around, and then we exit. So I'm teaching the kids where I teach that this is a ceremonial when we come into this classroom, because it's a culture classroom. Right in the center, they did this on purpose. They have the colors for the Omaha Nation, and then right in the center is a real fiery orange circle, and that's the fire. So when we come in, we set the tables up in a square, and the kids all come to the left as they enter the classroom, and they go around. And we talk about that, about how we enter and we're just born, and then as we go, we're growing older, and then we're ready to exit on to the next one. So that's what I'm teaching, and that's what I'm doing. So
it's the number 4, or the significance of 4 is like infused in like just everyday practices.
yes,
The way that you're painting, the way that you're laying out your exhibition, right?
yes.
Yeah. Okay, did you want to talk about any of your other pieces? specifically, maybe the one with the forward direction, yeah. And we can see the horses kind of a little
Yeah.
bit, because that's from the same show.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about this piece?
Is that mine? No.
Yeah.
All right, so again, just 4 directions, pattern, the repetitive pattern. The more times you sing your songs when you're on Blecha, the more times you're saying your prayers over and over. Like the Tibetan monks, they put up their prayer flags and they're all written on there and they're just all over. But that brings you closer to the Creator. And so that's what I was trying to do, is get us to think about not skipping a step by singing the songs over and over and over and over to bring us closer to the Creator during our ceremonies. And so that's why I put all of that on there. So I think of painting as someone that's writing a song, and as I'm painting, I'm thinking of color, and I put color on, and then I go back and look at it, and I either love it or hate it, and then I change it, and it's just a whole continual process over and over and over and over. And I always related it back to being closer to the Creator.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your explanation of your work. And we'll move on to Colleen to talk about the significance of floor, her understanding of it and how it applies to her work.
I was just going to agree with them.
Yeah, whatever they said.
With some correction.
Yeah.
I think what I do is start with Martin's description. I think of those 4 directions, and of not just 4, but the 7. 6 isn't that big for me, but 4 and 7 certainly are. So I'll just give you a different description of it. It's one I used with my students for many years. Hopefully you can visualize this. So think of 3 discs. Okay, each one below the other, separation. And in that center disc, there is a cross that is separated into 4 directions. Okay. And from that center of that middle one, there is a central axis that runs from the lower disc to the top disc to the center. So that's your 7. That's your 4 directions, your below, your above, and your center, with the center being the most important. So it makes a good native model of the world, to at least as a general construct. So some tribes have more versions of how many underworlds. Some have more versions of how many upper worlds, but they all connect at the center. In that center, so I know Martin was going off on linear time a little bit. I confused myself like crazy when I was younger, trying to understand time and end in time. And there was all it ever meant to me growing up. And when people would use it, they'd laugh. Oh, it just means late. Doksha, tomorrow. You know, it was like a funny thing. It was like a joke. But I knew it was more important. So it was this kind of a long-term study with the help of an artist friend, a Sundance priest, Arthur Héļáka, and his teachings and his guidance in my research to really search this material out. So I became obsessed with time and space. And so that 4 in particular, or I'll say our creation stories, is what I got into. And there were, if you don't know them, there were three texts that I went to. The first was an early publication done down at Holy Rosary, but it was published through Black Hills Teachers College, probably at the time. I think Joellen Archambault, another Lakota artist, worked on that material. So that was sort of the first version of that creation story that I came across. Then Elaine Johnner did Lakota Myth, which is a pretty good publication, pretty solid. based on the works of Walker. And then there's a smaller version that came out later called Sons of the Wind. So that gives you a brief synopsis of the creation story. So those were the sources that I was looking at, but then I also had, as Gerald talked about, all of that ritual experience, you know, doing the vision quest, doing the sun dance, doing the sweats, that whole ceremonial cycle. So I'll come back to my little model of the world. So that center, sometimes referred to as your navel. You can also put a human being in the center, and your spine acts as that central axis. So you are that microcosm of the larger world that he talked about. Some people use a mountain or a volcano. We would see that throughout Mexico, throughout Mayan, Aztec mythology. You'd see it in other, probably even Eastern Europe, you know, where that center is a pyramid. It's a mountain. It's a very important mountain because that is the center of the world for them. So then so that 4 really is establishing the space of Earth, you know, of the Earth plane. And in those directions, so my understanding, a little bit different than Martin's, is that the West is red, the North would be blue or black, used interchangeably, the East yellow, and the South white. And so it was on this, and maybe just when Gerald talked about these sons of that established these directions. Well, the creation story is really about the establishment of time. So the first time is before time. The second time is the day-night sequence. The third time is the lunar month, and the fourth time is the year. So every time you look at that 4, it's also about a time called the year, which repeats. It's a circle. We go through as we mentioned, the 4 seasons, the 4 ages of life. All of those are a part of that. So in the third time, yes, the sun and the moon at one time ruled the day and night together. They ruled together. But then the sun got googly eyes, and he started looking at this woman who was, I'll say she's like our predecessor as a human. So she wasn't a great being. She wasn't a great spirit, but she caught the eye of the sun. And so he gets to doing googly eyes at her, and Ennui, the moon, sees that, and she gets jealous, she gets angry, and says, I'm the most beautiful one. And she's hurt. She's very hurt. And so she runs away and says she'll never look at the sun again. So at that point, they do separate. But the children that are born out of that, so they're now separate. So the son is with this Ite, a Nogite. She's this double-faced woman. And it's with her, no, the son doesn't have children with her. Tate, the wind, has children with her. And it's these 4 sons. There's actually 5, but there are 4 sons. And they end up being, because it created so much chaos among the great spirits, they're exiled to the top of the earth. They have to live on top of the earth now with Iktomi, who got to be a bad boy too. So they have to live on top of the earth. And then Nogite has to live on top of the earth. So it's harder for them. They don't get to live in that spirit world anymore. And the sons of Tate the wind and of Nogite, they aren't great spirits yet, but they are half. So from Tate the wind. And so after they're on the earth for a while, Skan the sky sends his daughter Wope, and she comes to earth, and this is what this piece is about. Okay, it's just Sons of the Wind. So in the center above, you can see here's this falling star coming to earth. She's going to come and visit these 4 brothers and tell them what they must do. So that's Wope. She comes as a falling star. And she tells the brother that if they want to be great spirits, they are going to have to establish these directions. And so then that begins their journey, starting at the west. So all of our ceremonies began facing the west, moved to the north, to the east, and then to the south. And then they get repeated again, usually 4 times. But every time you make that movement, what you're doing is you're participating in this was when the world was first created. When we do it, we recreate the world each time we do that. We're renewing the world. We're making it fresh again. We're making it alive and part of our present each time you make that circle. And you do that 4 times. So our rituals are very, very easy to understand. I think if you know the right pattern, you understand what you're doing, you will get the results that you're looking for, those things that you're praying for, those things that you hope for, the blessings that you send people, because you're doing that in a very important way in which it's being done for the first time and fresh in a renewed way each time that you do that. So in my image here, my red is the west, my blue is the north, the yellow is the east, and the white is the south. So it was an installation when you walked into the gallery, that's what you walked through. What I found interesting was kids got this a whole lot faster than adults got it. So you can, there's this openness in a children's mind that they just look at it and they get it so much easier, whereas adults were trying to intellectualize the whole thing over and over again, and they didn't quite get it, but they were like, Mom, is that the seasons, And okay, and then on top of it, there are also birds. There's paper mache birds on top of each of the capitals. So those were the bird helpers for each of the directions. So in the west, it's a swallow. In the north, it's magpie. In the east, it's yowl. In the south, it's a meadowlark. So those are the specific birds associated with each of those directions. I think that's about all I would say about that one.
Okay, did you want to talk about your next piece?
I'd rather, I want to end with this one.
Okay, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a detail. Probably over my life, I've done about 3 Commonwealth shows, Canada, Australia, US. And the best one I did was an actual cultural exchange where 3 artists and a curator from Manitoba, we went to Australia, to Sydney. We did an exchange with the Aboriginal Artist Gallery there. And then later they came to Manitoba and we met with them. We did a show in Manitoba with them. So it was what I wanted. You can't see the whole thing. This is just a detail of a blanket. And I called it the Young Equator. And this one is more political. It just has to do with borders, how the West used terms like terra nullius and païen connu, meaning unknown land, unoccupied country, nobody's there, we get to take it. And that's how the whole of Australia was confiscated from the Indigenous people. Nobody's there, it's ours. It's what they did to this space, which is the Louisiana Purchase in the United States, saying it's a desert, nobody's out there, we can just take it. So those were legal terms that were used to simply confiscate the land. I could have done it in Canada with Rupert's land, except for it was stolen by the company. They couldn't say nobody was there. They had forts all over Rupert's land, had been trading with Indigenous people for decades, and then just said, oh, this land is ours because we put forts here, and half of, a good third of Canada goes that way. So to represent that, what I did with Australia was I used the Australian Indigenous flag colors, which are black, red, and yellow for the whole of Australia. And then I use the medicine wheel colors for this area to say, this is the heart of the medicine wheel people. You know, and so it's not just Lakota, it's many of the plains, certainly all of the plains tribes that focus around the medicine wheel. So that was all I wanted to say about that piece. Yeah. All right. So out of so before I did those pillars, I did a big series of work called Voice in the Blood, which was trying to illustrate that whole creation story and then the establishment of our shamanic traditions as a whole exhibition. So this is a piece from that exhibition, and it's in that trying to establish the shamanic traditions. Okay, so it's called The Intercessors. So when I was younger, I mean, people made such a mystique about medicine men. You know, who was a medicine man? Who could you identify as one? Who said they were one? You know, and what did they do? And what were their credentials? How did they get there? How do you get that knowledge? And so it was, as I said, you know, if I think of these things when I'm young and I don't know, then I'm like a dog. I'm going to pursue it until I get some answers to how I can understand this at a deeper level. So these guys that are in black, that are kind of horizontal, they all either think they're dead or they're dying. And then this is just to show the different kinds of medicine men that we have. And the reason I wanted to do this is I don't think either of you mentioned 4x4, the Tope King. So the 4x4, those 4 major spirits, and then their companions is the next group. And once they had companions, then they decided they wanted offspring. So then they each have an offspring. But then there's 4 more. And those other 4 are our soul. So we don't have 1 soul, we have 4 souls. So we have the Nia, which is the life breath. We have the Nagi, which would be like your ghost. It would look like you, it would behave like you. We have the Nagila, which is might not look like you, might not behave like you, but it is your creative self. That is your true spark of life, in a sense. That one will go and join the rest of the universe when your Nia is gone. And then the 4th part of that is Sichung, and that is this. Everybody has their superpower that you're born with. So you have to find what that little superpower is. It could be in your will, something in your will, but all things have Sichung. Like a gorilla has a really big strength, Sichung, right? And an ant, probably not so much, but he can get into places that a gorilla can't get into. So it can be weak, small, strong, large, great, however you want to think of what that individual Sichung is. And one of the things that we do is you have it, and so long as you take care of yourself, you will keep that Sichung. But we do things to enhance it. That's why we wear the skins of animals. We wear their feathers. We dance like animals. We can borrow their Sichung to strengthen ours. So all of their medicine then becomes joined with ours. So what I was trying to do with this is to show you how these different medicine men are taking care of different parts of our soul. So I'll start with this one in the upper left. So he's a bear medicine man. And he's probably dealing with this guy's psychological problems. You know, he probably has mental issues. So he's praying over him. Then there's a buffalo medicine man on the other side. So I think of him as taking care of care of like the Nia. I'd say the bear medicine man's taking care of his Nagi. And the buffalo medicine man is taking care of his Nia, his life breath. So he'd be most like a chief is to his people. He has to be a father to his people to nourish him. And so that's what he's doing. He's just making him well with good medicine. And then this man in the lower left, he's a ritualist. He would be a priest. He's taking care of all of those other parts of the soul, the Nagila, perhaps somebody who's lost their soul, or one of their souls has gone wandering. And so he's trying to bring that back to him. And then the guy in over on the far right, it's an elk medicine man. So that man, he thinks he's dying. He's not dying. He's just brokenhearted, you know, but that's what a broken heart feels like, that he thinks he's dead. So he's getting elk medicine from, you know, to help him get strong again, to make his heart strong again. So it's called the intercessors. So that's my little contribution to the four.
Can I just ask a quick question and then we'll open it up for everybody, about Indian time? That you mentioned that, you know, we generally kind of joke about it as like when we show up late, like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm running on Indian time.
Yeah.
And so what, do you have like a quick explanation about, I don't know if quick is the right word, but of how you understand what Indian time is?
It's a point and it's sacred.
It's a point and it's sacred.
The being late part is everything starts when it's supposed to start. We aren't on seconds, minutes, hours. That's why all these ceremonies never happen when you think they're going to happen. Everything has to be in place. Everything has to be ready and just right. And when it is, then it begins.
So Indian time is about things happening when they're supposed to happen.
Yes.
When everything is kind of aligned correctly.
Yes, when it's all aligned.
And not just tardiness.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your explanations of your work. I guess if folks will, I'll open it up for questions. Maybe let's thank our panelists for their presentation. And if you, we'll open it up for questions for a little bit. You folks have questions for Gerald, Martin, or Colleen about the things that they were just talking about or about their work.
I always have questions.
Yeah.
From an educator standpoint, I've always taught in an elementary school, but currently working from elementary to high school. And we really, what I noted over the years is that we teach from a deficit model in our public education system and look at things that you're not, when a child comes into a school system, they're immediately told, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. You don't have enough of this knowledge. And you know, we've all seen those scenarios where a teacher says, draw a flower, and the child draws a flower, and it isn't drawn the way that the teacher wants it done, and says, you're doing it wrong. Our system does that regularly to children, and we're working to try and find a way to bring culture, native thought, philosophy, culture, language back into who our children are, so that they can grow up with it and become better adults. And so this is really helpful to me in that capacity. I had spent some time listening to Lionel Bordeaux talk, and one of the things that he talked about was that we have to teach ourselves to think in fours and sevens. and how important that is. So a lot of what I heard you guys talk about is reasons to do that. And through your art, being able to demonstrate that. So in that capacity, what would be ways that we can work that into bringing that to children from a little person and helping guide them through becoming adults, because I could see the value of this for them. And so wanting to be able to figure out how do we work this in for our little guys, because our teachers are trained to look at things very linear and a Western way. And sometimes I always worry we just take things away from children, telling them that, you know, that's not good for you, you need to do this. And so I was just listening to the things that, you know, really appreciate each and every way that Martin set it all up, and both Gerald and Colleen contributed to that. It just, there's so much information there that I can bring to an education world. But I need some guidance on how to do that. So especially starting with little guys, is how do we do that? Any one of you?
I been teaching for many years, and I taught just about every grade from elementary through college. And then the most interesting group for me was the elementary students. They were the ones that were just getting started. And there was a great artist who said that all children are artists. But finding a way to keep them as doing art is the way you try to get through to them. And so on the elementary level, you give them all the necessary materials, equipment, and information that you can in order for these students to keep something in mind that art is important to them. Okay, it's just not academics, it's just not technology and so forth. And although I believe that technology and science and mathematics are great, I also believe that these students, if they keep things in mind about creativity and the way to express themselves, is important, that they would realize that where would we be or who would we be if it wasn't for the arts? And so, you know, you've got to give your children all the necessary attention in order to keep them going, to be creative, you know. They need to express themselves. And a lot of times when you're working on math and science and so forth, it's something that is set down already. They must learn about it. But in arts, their mind is left open and they're able to create and express, and that's important.
So I hear all the time in my 6th grade, 7th grade, even up to high school, they try something for the first time and they all say, this sucks, I'm not good at it. They want to take their paper, wrinkle it up, throw it in the trash. And I tell them, you have to fail in order to succeed. This is the first time you've done this. It takes lots and lots of practice. If you take a clarinet or any instrument and you can't play it, you don't have the practice. You don't have the hours that it takes to learn to blow into this instrument to get a sound out of it. And so it's part of the process. And I keep telling them over and over, it's that repetitive. You have to do this more than once, more than once. And it's that 50th, that 80th, that 200th time that you've done this. That's how you're going to get better at this. So I used to do a diagnostic assessment. What do they know? And then I would do a formative at the middle, and then at the end I would do that summative assessment. And you could see early drawing to around midterms, and then that final. And so that was the way I gauged college students, and then I'm kind of modifying what I do with my middle school students and high school students.
I talked too long. I liked everything after fourth grade. I didn't like high school. The fourth to ninth grade, I got along fine with. The little tiny guys, not enough content, just, there's not enough attention span, or I think you need like a music or dance person for that age. They're just moving all the time. So and I'm an information person. So I need them to have a little bit of attention for me to get information out to them where we can do a project, do something around it. I was sitting here thinking, Marilyn, about what your mom had told Ben about the meadowlark. And that seemed like that's useful to me. Like if I want to teach about the meadowlark and what direction he belongs to. So it was Marilyn's mother, Alice Sherman, who taught for many years, said, well, the meadowlark speaks Lakota for one thing, and knows when you're lying. So that's a pretty good lesson, I think, just in itself for like a younger person. As they get older, and what I also found with creation stories is you can take them as literally as you want to at any age. The stories never change. What changes is you. What changes is your understanding of them. And each time as you grow and you learn a little bit more, you can come back to that story, and all of a sudden you get some more insight about it. So the basic stories are kind of there. I think just reintroducing them, at different periods, maybe to rethink them just a little bit, and how has that meaning changed? The only reason I didn't like high school students is I found they sounded too much like their parents. They're stuck between being their parents and trying to become who they're going to become. And they're just really snotty a lot of times. So, you can't, they know it all already. So it's really hard was hard for me to kind of break through that. They're creating such a facade of how adult they are, I guess. Junior high, cause they were hilarious. I mean, 1 minute they're kids, next minute they're kind of adults. So they're, they've got a space you can break into with them a little bit more. University students, I just felt like you chose it. You're here for the duration, so this is how it goes.
Thank you.
I wanted to say too, I think what Gerald said about failure, and that you have to fail before you can succeed, and the importance of repetitive, of doing something over and over and over and over again. I mean, all of these distinguished artists, but I think took many years to get to where they are. I think the thing too, is that we think of failure as a negative thing, and I think failure isn't a bad thing, and that it's important that we keep trying. And I think that's what the significance of the four and the repetitive, and it's important that we, in the work that we do, is to be understanding that we just keep trying. We don't get it right the first time. And failure is part of the process. It's okay to fail. I know I wouldn't want to share some of my early artwork with anybody. It's like embarrassing, my first painting project, and putting it to what I can do now. It's like, oh, it's so embarrassing, but it took me, many years to get from here to there. So, just lots of practice. We do have a question from the Zoom session, or the Zoom, because this is being live, people are attending on Zoom as well. Would anyone want to share how the power of four has had an impact in their own life and experience.
We've lived through the ages. We have survived the ages to say we're passing, we've managed to pass through all of them. Except for the great senior, far senior age.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Anything to add, Martin, or?
No.
Yeah, okay.
That's fine.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
Thank you. No.
Yeah, okay.
In a lot of Asian cultures, the number 4 is like kind of like there's a superstition around it because it sounds like the word death. What would you say to those audience members when you bring up the concept of 4 and the idea of death and grief? Does that relate to your artwork at all?
So I just go back to these ceremonials. So the keeping of the soul, where you put out food, water, tobacco, favorite foods, favorite times of the year. You do that for that year to help you through the grieving process. And it's you having this conversation with that person that has passed each and every day to help you get through that, have that understanding. And when I'll take Lakota culture, so when someone passes, your relatives come after you. And it's a celebration of your life from going from this life to the next. And all your relatives are going to be there. They're going to surround you with that love, and they're going to invite you into that next world. So it's not very sad for us that are left behind. It is, but for that person, it's a new beginning. And when you go into the next world, you're greeted with laughter. You're greeted with love, and that going from one world to the next is not seen as a bad thing. It's seen as, you've lived your life and you've taught the things that you felt important, those values from your culture, and that's what you're leaving behind. So we grieve on this side, but they're having a good time, a party on the other side. So we see that. My grandfather, he was in a nursing home, and late at night he got dressed, and a nurse came in and she said, "What are you doing?" He said, "My wife came to take me home." She said, "There's nobody here." She got him undressed, put him back in bed, but he passed away. And so my grandma came after him. And so we took comfort in that. Or my mom, when she passed, her sister came, she was talking to her. Things like that happen all the time. So we know that on the other side, they're there. And when we talk about our ancestors are walking with us, the soul doesn't go past the moon and into outer space. The soul is right here. It's all around us. So when we say we're walking with our ancestors, we truly believe that. We truly believe that our ancestors are walking with us through those good times, those bad times, those hard times. The ancestors are all around us and helping us.
Any other questions?
Any and all. Looking at ledger art, I noticed that it looked like a lot of the detailed art was done by men and geometric art was by women. Why do you think that is?
I think that from looking back on various studies that in the past, a lot of the geometric designs were done by women. And that as time went on, started to change. And the type of work that has been done today is done by everyone. It's not just the women. And so you realize that again, time is changing things. And then it's going from one thing to another. And then when we do that, we find that you still carry on a tradition, right? You still carry on an aspect of the culture in which you belong to, and that's important to everyone.
Through one of my mini classes, they talked about the Navajo men would design the rug and the women would weave the rug.
So that was the joint
Yes,
creative practice.
it may have changed from then to now.
Yeah, I like what Martin was saying, that time, that things are not stagnant, right? That we don't stay exactly one way all the time. That practices can adjust and change as time moves too. I think that's important. Did you have anything to add to that?
I guess the example I like to give is because that really bothered me, concerned me when I was a young artist, because I knew that different tribes had very different restrictions about what women could do, what men could do in terms of art. And, those boundaries could be very touchy. So that was my understanding, was that Lakota women weren't allowed to do like things of their vision. Men had vision quests, but women didn't. They could depict their hunting parties and their war parties. Well, that wasn't a women's role. So we ended up in this very restricted, abstract kind of role. So one of the styles of robes that women did was this box and border design, which is an abstraction of a buffalo, interiors, organs, whatever. And so I wasn't sure how far I could go with any of those things. So I just did figurative work, kind of not getting into anything that specific design wise for a while, until Vic Reynolds did a box and border design as a print. And I said, aha, he broke the rules. If he broke the rules, I get to break the rules. And I think somebody else also, Herman Redout, he also did a box and border design. So these are Lakota artists from my age. So once these men had broken the rules and jumped into women's territory, I said, game on, we can go the other way too.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that for Lakota people, it's about our role in how we contribute to community anymore, and not necessarily like so restrictive.
Yeah.
Because I also think historically, if men were out on a raiding party or out hunting by themselves and they had a blowout in their moccasins, they wouldn't run around with no moccasin on, they would fix it themselves, when historically women majority made the clothes. But I'm sure the men weren't like, oh no, there's no woman here to help me, I can't do this, I'm sure they did it. It's the same with women. If there was no men around, they were like, oh no, I can't do that. They did the things that they needed to do to survive.
They use gray cape.
Yeah. Tape. I think we have another question from a young audience member on online, and they're and I think they're in 6th grade. They're asking what inspires you to create family, music, stories, etc.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, the inspiration for me was in 1970, when I got out of the Army, I was looking for something to do. And there was an opening for a museum technician at the Southern Plains Museum in Anadarko, Oklahoma. And so I went, applied for it, and I got it. So in the process of sweeping, mopping floors, washing windows, mowing lawns, I was given the opportunity to interview artists and to not only interview them, but their work, so that we can put together a brochure on these individuals. And when I spoke to these artists, they would tell me their reasons why they got into the arts. And it made a lot of sense, you know. And they told me that it's going to be hard at first, and it's not going to be, you're not going to be successful at first. But once you get started and you get hooked on it, you'll be able to continue it if you're really interested. Because you said a lot of artists start out and they quit at a certain point in time in their life, and you know they can do something, but they decided to, oh, I can get a better job over here or over there or whatever. So when I was speaking to these artists, that's where I got my first introduction into the arts. And they said to me, let's do this. Let's see if we can create something together. And so as a result of that, I looked at I had a GI Bill. So I said, I'm going to go to school for this. I couldn't paint. I couldn't draw. I couldn't do anything of those things. But like anything else, you have to go and learn about it. You have to go and take classes. You have to be with people who that are doing exactly the thing that you want to do. So I went to school in Denver, then from there to New Mexico, and continued my art career after that. So it's the people that I was involved with, the people that I've been around with. They are the ones that inspired me to go into the arts. And it's important because a lot of these people are no longer around. Maybe you heard some let me see, T.C. Cannon was one of the artists that I got to know pretty well. Alan Hauser, and later on he became a teacher of mine. And there are a number of other artists from all different disciplines, from pottery to photography, painting to drawing and sculpture, beadwork. I met all of these artists, and they were the ones that said, do this, do that, you know. You don't have to do it my way, but just do it, you know. And so I did. I said, good, I'm going to go to school for this. So I did. That's what inspired me.
Gerald or Colleen, you want to answer?
When I was in second grade at St. Paul's Indian Mission, I would walk down the hallway and I would see these posters of different artists, Rick Shoulder, Sam English, Oscar Howe, Alan Hauser. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be an artist. Didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted my work on a poster. And I wanted to hang up in this hall. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I was always drawing on anything and everything to get my hands on. And started with these race cars in the desert for some reason, doing a wheelie. And you can see you know, the bird that you just do this. There's birds in the sky, a cactus. I'm just having fun making stuff up. And from there, I just kept drawing just different things. And I got into this whole comic book thing and drawing comics. And then I got to sixth grade, seventh grade. We had a different art teacher who really encouraged us, gave us everything we needed. Kim Vanderheiden and said, come in before class, come in at lunchtime, come in after school. And I just loved going up there because there was all this stuff to play with, colored pencils and nice paper. And then she let us paint. So that's what I want. I want to paint. I kept going up there, kept going and doing artwork all through school. And then after the Marine Corps, I was at Black Hill State and I took a drawing class and I said, I was gonna be a PE teacher because I wanted to wear sweats the rest of my life. That was the goal. Still is. I think I could be a PE teacher. And then when I took that drawing class, I was like, I'm changing my major and I'm going down to Santa Fe. So I went to IAI, and I came back to South Dakota and I went through USD and then I had to try to get into a program, MFA program, and then the only one that took me was the University of Oklahoma. So down there, you know, I used the imagery that was in front of me, and I was so interested in color, and back then it was all about the sale. You know, $60 went a long way back when. And I thought that was awesome. And so as time went on, I got better, and then I found my own voice through color, through symbolism, through shape, through repetition. And that's kind of where I'm at. So now I'm reflecting, and then the pieces are more about trying to make that connection to the next generation.
What about you, Colleen? What inspires you?
Lots of things, but I think in terms of youth, my mom was a fashion designer. My dad was a lot of things, but among them, he was a ornamental welder. I think I always dreamt that someday I would make sculpture with my dad. But mom was a big influence. She taught us a lot about color and pattern and all of those things. So, and that's how it was in the older past. Your you know, your teachers, your master artists were in your community, and most often they were in your family. That's who you learned from. And when those people no longer had those skills, or they were taken away, or they were lost, you know, then we were left with hopefully schools that could pick up where they had left off. But those schools weren't about our culture. They couldn't teach us those things. But just around here, there was, you know, my mom, my dad, myself, we all entered the very first Red Cloud shows. You know, started in Rapid City at the Mother Butler Center. And I remember one year dad took first, mom took second, and I took third. You know, so there. Yeah, so there, you know, you just start with little things like that, but then but there weren't shows for us. There wasn't that, you know, how do I get my work up there or out there? You know, you had to be really good, like Oscar Howgood, to get into the Philbrook or the Phil Hurd. You know, those were the only two big art shows in the country at the time. But along with that, I mean, it happened very gradually, but then shows started popping up more and more where you can participate in those. You just have to enter. You just have to be brave enough to say, I want to share my work and, you know, live with whatever the consequences are. I mean, you need to have critique isn't a terrible thing, you know, critique is how you grow. And I always told my students that, you know, your parents love you, your kids love you, your boyfriends love you, whatever. I don't have to. So I will be honest with you and I will tell you what I think of the work. And I think that's really, I think they value that because the people that love you are simply going to say, oh, that's so nice. I love it. And, you know, they'll encourage you emotionally, but they don't really help you critically about your work. And so it helps to have somebody else out there that they aren't attached to be critical with them.
That's. Any more questions?
I wanted to ask, each of you mentioned some sort of intellectual side of art. Do you have any book recommendations to dive in a little bit deeper on the significance of 4 with art?
What was the question again?
Any book recommendations?
Oh, book recommendation. I think that there's some recommendations to the Indian Arts and Crafts Board out of Washington. Contemporary Sioux painting, contemporary Southern Plains painting, and I think the other one is Northern Plains art out of Browning, Montana. So those are 3 that are very good at, describing the artwork of the artist and of that particular period of time now, because those were done, back in before the 70s, I think, or in the early 70s. So things may have changed from that time to now, but it has very good information about design and color and who the artists were and all of that.
The Power of 4. Somebody asked about that.
I think that Sons of the Wind, which is the story of the 4 brothers.
Which one?
It's called Sons of the Wind. I can't remember who the author is on that right offhand. Does anybody remember? Smaller booklet.
It's built off of Walker.
Yeah,
I found it at, Thirty Edge bookstore, Lily Mendoza's Birdcage. And she's online.
Yeah.
And I know at the Heritage Center, it's a different name now. They have a library that has some of the books that, Colleen was talking about, they're out of Black Hills State, they were done in, collaboration with Holy Rosary Mission at the time, which then became Red Cloud, but there's a series of books, and there's one in there about Native American or traditional art that might have some of that information in it. And I don't know, I'm always bugging her, can I get a copy of that? But
PDF somewhere?
are they, yeah, so you can look online or you her. It's down there. But those are, developed back in the late 60s, early 70s through a grant. So there really is some good information in those books, that historic information that I think is really valuable. And I think that would be a good place to look and get. I'm trying to remember some of the people that contributed to it, but she was Vivian One Feather at the time that helped put that together.
Yeah, the Sons of the Wind is edited by Doolin, DOOLING. And Vivian is One Feather is the introduction, and Elaine Jenner did the afterwards. In that book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience?
Just have a comment, I mean, people are amazing, it's just amazing to me how you talk pretty much about almost like the same thing, but when you put it out on your art, you're on totally different pieces of art, but, I just wanna say that first, but I sit here and I also think about, we gotta keep in mind, I know there's a lot of organizations, that are working with artists now, new groups coming up and everything, but I just can never forget, because I get so many people, once you buy earrings or any kind of art from people on the reservation, they go to Maryland, she'll buy it from you. They don't really see themselves as artists. So when we would put them in a historical center for a week and you have to convince them, you are an artist, you are a good artist, they're coming to see you. But they just see themselves as this person selling on a reservation, and they get a little money for it, whatever.
Trying to
So,
survive.
yeah, so, I mean, I've been around artists forever, it seems like. But I always have them in my mind, and I always think, I've got a bit of information and build something, I don't know, something for their families too.
Do you have, things, Marilyn, I don't know what, yeah.
Where'd you go with me?
Do you have any encouragement maybe for young artists or young creatives? Or young, or I was just gonna say, or older, but folks that are creatives and don't think of themselves maybe necessarily as artists, but do you have any thoughts or encouragements or things that they could do to still maybe more like an artist, or do you have thoughts about yeah, what does it mean to be an artist? Yeah.
I was just thinking. What, I don't know how to ask that. Have you learned from those children that you taught? And what, is there anything real significant that you learned from those children?
I think that working with children is very inspiring because they are at a point where they see things differently, and when they want to do it, they're not inhibited. They do not stop or to think about what they're going to do. They just do it, and that's why one of the great artists said that, in order to keep children to doing art and become artists, is you got to find a way in which to keep them to doing it, because as they get older, what's going to happen? They're going to change, and they want to go into something else that will give them not only recognition but make money and so on and so forth. And the arts is a little difficult when it comes to that. So you have to learn to be able to teach these children that what they're doing is good and it's all right, and it doesn't matter how it turns out. The way children do art and the way it comes out is going to be different from an adult, definitely, of course. But we find out that if you keep encouraging them, then they'll continue to do the artwork. And as time goes on, they will change.
I just love the freshness, the newness of their expressions. They're honest, they're authentic. They aren't trying to be something that will come later. So it's just that initial creative response, and it comes out so beautifully sometimes. And it's like, how can you keep that? Trying to keep that part of yourself as an artist as you get older and more practice is really hard to do. To be that real with yourself and with your audience.
But when the kids bring me something or they say, "What do you think of my drawing?" And I'll say, "It's awesome." And then they say, "You didn't even look at it." So I finally look at it and I say, "This is great." And just that encouragement. And the high school kids, they get offended when I say it's awesome without looking at their work. But I keep telling them they have to keep trying. They'll get better. They can make something without me being right there with them. And then each piece is so uniquely different. They learn a little bit more the more they practice. And that's what I keep telling them. You have to practice. Thank you.
So, kind of stepping a little bit back into what Marilyn was saying and thinking about how would you maybe define art, and how can, because there are a lot of creative people in our community that create a lot of they create regalia for powwows, they're beating like graduation cap. I've seen a lot of that on Facebook recently because all the graduations and ribbon skirts and adornments, earrings, bracelets, all the things. Belts is becoming really big recently, but I these folks may not always think of themselves as an artist or creating. They're not doing anything artistic, they're just making stuff. And I fall into that category all the time, to not and mostly because I'm too afraid to say I'm an artist, because I think it takes a lot of courage to put your stuff out there. Out in a gallery and say, here's my art for you to look at and to judge. And so, I just wonder if you have any like encouragement or thought about how somebody can start to transition that thought about themselves, and claim that kind of artist, I'm an artist, kind of thing.
It depends on if you want to go from what someone would say this is survival art versus full-time. So then you have to do the math of how many pieces do I need to make car payment, rent. You go down the line, however many bills you have. And then can I do that in my spare time, or when do I go from transitioning from part-time artist or part-time crafter to full-time? And I think that's where a lot of people get kind of hung up on making something that's utilitarian versus something that's adornment versus something that's for putting on the wall. So there's all the different stages. And so working for First Peoples Fund, you come across that you have to convince people that what you're doing is valuable and that to see themselves in a different light. Because I think they think an artist is way up there showing only in a gallery, things like that. But everybody has something to contribute. And so you always tell students, somewhere in the world, someone likes what you're doing. And sometimes they laugh, sometimes they don't. There's an audience for your work out there. So, but that's just it. You have to find that. So if you go to the same, like me trying to sell a $10,000 painting across every reservation, I get many papers. Versus know your audience, but you'd have to bring it all the way down small, something small. And then the further out you go, you get larger and larger.
I believe that everyone, and that's everyone in here included, has the ability to create something. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a painting, a drawing. Or you can even create something with food. Must be getting hungry.
Just
but you've got to relay that information onto people, and especially to the younger person. What they're doing is creative, and what their parents do, or their brothers or sisters, and if they can find a different way of doing it, that's being creative. That's very important. You have to be able to tell your students that this is the way that we learned. And then when we learn, then we take it from there.
Nothing. No, okay. Well, so we're just in the last few minutes of the panel, and I just thank you again for sharing with us and talking about the significance of four, how four impacts your work and the way that you make your work too, and answering questions from the audience. Do you have a final thought about the significance of four before we wrap up? This maybe one last thought about four and the importance of it in creating.
I think that the importance of four is that it started way back sometime before our grandparents, our great grandparents, and so on and so forth, and that four is continuing on up to our time, and that it will continue on to the next generations, and that it's important for us to remember that when we look at these things in that context, we find that it's going to change a little bit, but the main idea or the main concept is going to stay there. Okay, it'll always be there, no matter what. And no matter how other people look at it and want to change it, we're gonna find that, we're gonna still keep it the way it is.
Like Marty said, the times keep changing and the artist will continue to find new ways, be creative with that, and so that it's not just one small image and that's the end of it. They're gonna find ways to interpret that. So everybody has a different way of looking at it, like three of us.
Colleen?
Just I think of it as a completion number, but one that, as Martin said, doesn't, it doesn't stop. You just begin again, you know, but you complete a cycle and you know, recognize, acknowledge when you complete a cycle, begin again. Yeah.
Okay, so let's take the. We will have lunch upstairs, right? Yeah, so lunch upstairs and then you wanna. So